TikTok, is it a harmless social media app or a major threat to national security? We're going to dig into some of the reasons why people should be more concerned about what's going on with the app and why China and Russia have been waging information warfare against the U.S. for years on this episode of Today in Tech. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Joining me on the show today is Craig Albert, PhD, a professor of political science and graduate director of the Master of Arts in Intelligence and Security Studies at Augusta University. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
Hey, so let's get right into it. As a professor, I'd like to get a little bit of a history lesson here about information warfare between different nations, because it's not necessarily a new concept. I think we're just calling it that now. But can you give us a brief and quick history lesson on the concept and then how that's grown over the technology age?
Yeah, perfect question. So information warfare is just a fancy way of saying propaganda operations, right? It's a little bit more complicated than that. But propaganda, of course, was written about by Sun Tzu in The Art of War, over 2,000 years ago, continued through Machiavelli's Art of War, and into Clausewitz, of course. He discussed it, quite clearly in his book. So the idea of propaganda or influence campaign or persuasion or, winning your enemies over without having to fire a shot is thousands of years old. So that's typically what we mean by information warfare, is winning over your enemies without firing a shot. The difference between now, obviously, and like 2,000 years ago is the extent of and how easy information warfare can come across to people. So because of things like social media, even electronic warfare, which is a part of information warfare, or radio frequency warfare is a part of information warfare, just the amount of things that we have out there that are connected to the internet, that are connected to all these different signals, means that different nation state and non-state actors can really amplify their message, amplify information warfare effects against an adversary, and really get a message out very quickly into a wide audience like never before. And so it's really like this giant force multiplier that kind of is its own domain of warfare. Whereas, 2,000 years ago, they waged information warfare by, a pamphlet with a pigeon and sending it over or something, and it reached 8 people or something.
Right.
Now, with a tweet or something is instantaneous. And that's the major, historical development, especially through social media warfare.
Yeah, you would hear things about like dropping leaflets, bombers that would drop papers on the enemy or on citizens in another country. There were radio broadcasts that would basically be propaganda for people that are listening in the home country, things like that, right?
Yeah, like Radio Free Europe is a great example of that during the Cold War. We still have Radio Free Russia, things of that nature. Israel, most recently, still drops pamphlets on areas in Gaza. And I assume pretty quickly in southern Lebanon, it'll drop leaflets. And that's a form of propaganda. Their propaganda says, get out of this apartment complex. It's not going to be here in 2 hours.
Right.
So kind of a warning, but also meant to inspire fear, which is a form of propaganda.
So as you're studying information warfare and some of those concepts, is social media now the biggest example of how nations are waging this information warfare, or is it just one of many different methods?
I don't know if it's the biggest example. It's definitely the largest way to affect the mass population. So it's the most, kind of vocalized. It's the most easily seen in the mass audience. So the average typical American will understand and probably have been exposed to social media information warfare or cyber influence information warfare. So they understand it, or they're used to it, or they're exposed to it. But we still wage, especially Russia and Ukraine, right, electronic warfare, which is a part of information warfare. So signals jamming, blocking radio frequencies, things of that nature is also a way of understanding how information warfare operates. Information warfare is just the ability to influence a decision by the adversary. So anything in the domain of warfare where you're acting to seek to change the decision or alter the understanding of a decision for a foreign audience is information warfare. So if you think of all the domains of battlefield operations, cyber can do this, electronic warfare can do this, psychological operations can do this. And then, of course, the easiest to understand is social media warfare, because it's the one that directly targets the civilian population rather than just decision makers or war fighters.
Okay, and when we were talking before the show, you brought up this idea of neurocognitive hacking, and so to call this a shorter way, it's called hacking the brain, basically. So there is science behind this, that these methods work, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So neurocognitive hacking is where you really send messages to the frontal cortex, right, to the amygdala, and you actually change the processing of the brain. And you do this by sending negative messages, sometimes images of death, for instance, through, like, let's say you're watching YouTube, you don't know it, but in a brief, like, nanosecond, if you're watching a channel that you don't know about that's influenced by Russia or China, for instance, they have a video, and within that video, they have a clip that you cannot perceive in your mind. Your eyes don't recognize it, but your brain recognizes it. And it's some type of negative image, negative attitude, negative, some depiction of death or somebody actively dying, a corpse or something like that. And what it does is alter the brain chemistry in your brain and changes how you think about something, and it allows you to be like emotionally hijacked or much more sensitive to something.
Okay.
Russia did this quite frequently with 2016 elections, not with like corpse meddling or something like that, but more of just trying to instigate fear by sending negative messages on Facebook, sometimes kind of subliminally, sometimes without the audience really know that's what they were doing, or all the time without the audience really know that was their intention. But their point was to hijack the emotional presence in the brain so that you would react very negatively, very quickly, very emotionally without your rational brain thinking about something. And therefore, you're hijacked. And studies show that you react more aggressively to situations once you've been hijacked like that, when your neurons have been interrupted like that. You're much more assertive, you're much more defensive, you're more insecure, you're more likely to have different influences alter your perception. In other words, for information warfare, you're more susceptible to propaganda once that happens. Studies show it's only for a brief moment. Mm-hmm. And in the MACE program, we have professors that research this and publish about this quite frequently. And we have an upcoming project on this as well that I don't want to talk too much about because I don't want anybody else to steal the project from us.
Okay.
But we're really trying to figure out how this works in using neuroscience and psychological sciences. But this is something Russia has done in 2016. And this is something the U.S. intelligence community is starting to be aware of and start to take notice that, hey, Russia and China are probably doing this on social media, targeting U.S. Citizens. What can we do to try to prevent this and engage in counter-information warfare against these states?
Okay, and you're now adding the layer of social media because you're adding algorithms and similar technologies that provide content. And so if someone starts watching one of these messages and they stay there for a while, then the algorithm goes, oh, I got to serve more of these. And they start serving more and more of these. And then that leads you down a dark path. So, a lot of these social media apps, they all use algorithms. Now, you might say that Instagram uses it so that you can eventually buy stuff from them, or they use it to sell advertising to you. So why is TikTok particularly different from Instagram and Snapchat? Like, why is there all of this hullabaloo around the U.S. wanting to ban TikTok?
Yeah, great question again. You're right. All social media apps, in fact, all apps on your phone use these type of advanced algorithms to collect data, to understand the consumer, mainly for something that we call micro-targeting. Micro-targeting is when you insert all of your data on Facebook, for instance, right? Facebook then collects all this data that you have, combines it as information, processes it into intelligence, right? Intelligence is information used for a specific purpose. In this case, it's generally for selling ads, for generating revenue for Facebook, right? So all of these social media apps in particular do this for ad generation, for revenue sharing, for profit sharing. This is how they make their money. The difference between, let's say, Facebook Meta, which owns Instagram, of course, mm-hmm. and Messenger and all of that, is that TikTok is owned by the Chinese Communist Party. There's no if, and, or buts about it. ByteDance, by Chinese law, is a subsidiary of the Chinese Communist Party and right. must give all that information, hence collected intelligence, to the Chinese Communist Party. That means that the Chinese Communist Party has a CIA level of intelligence on every single American user of TikTok. So any information that you've put on TikTok, the Chinese Communist Party now has. It goes further than that. Any information that you have that is allowing third app authentication or sharing of app data on your phone, which is generally you allow TikTok to access all your other apps on your phone. Now TikTok can request all that information from all the different apps on you and create a full intelligence personnel profile of the user. So something that the NSA can't do in the United States on its citizens, the Chinese Communist Party has full access to 150 million Americans to do this, including children, by the way. And just think about that if we get into a kerfuffle with, China, if we get into some type of war, or not even war, but in some situation where there's something at the UN that they really want to alter the American political landscape on, they have the capability of turning that intelligence into propaganda based on all the information we've willingly consented to give them, so that they now know what type of influence operations to send out through TikTok to alter the decision-making of American audiences. That's what's so horrifying about it.
So when TikTok says that, we've got all of our servers in the U.S. and we're willing to put all the servers so that, all of the data won't go back to China, like, you don't probably believe any of that, right?
Chinese law states that a Chinese-owned company has to give that to the Chinese Communist Party upon the Chinese Communist Party asking for it.
Okay. But is there any other evidence that data from a phone has gone basically back to China, or is it just because of this ownership relationship?
ByteDance employees just in the past month have anonymously come out. So I always take people that are anonymous with a little grain of salt. But we know that ByteDance employees have come out and said, yes, we have given that China has requested this information, and we have given this information to the Chinese government.
Right. Okay. Oof.
Now, what they do with it, we have we're running, tests. We're looking at TikTok to see if they're actually engaging in and creating propaganda and tailored propaganda operations against TikTok users or against United States government officials that are on TikTok, for instance, which they shouldn't be, right? And especially U.S. military personnel. So academics and the government are trying to look at this to see if the Chinese Communist Party is actually taking advantage of this intelligence that TikTok allows them to have. So we don't know if they've gathered the intelligence and then created an influence operation based on that intelligence and activated it. What we know is that they have the information.
Can you give an example of how either a nation state or even if it's just a subgroup, a bunch of hackers, give an example of how they would use an influence campaign? How does it work within the realm of a nation trying to wage information warfare with us? Can you make an anecdote around it that makes a little bit more sense?
Yeah, perfect. There's two main types of this. The first is just a regular propaganda operation, influence operation. And then the second is an enhanced cyber attack in congruence with a propaganda operation. We call that a cyber-enabled influence operation. So I'll talk about both of them. Okay. The first is just a regular propaganda operation. So let's say the Chinese Communist Party wants to fund Russian military operations in Ukraine, and it doesn't want the United States to interfere with that or call sanctions against the Chinese Communist Party for funding operations for Russia in the state of Ukraine. So what it can do is gather information on how many U.S. users of TikTok are either pro-funding Ukraine, U.S. or pro-U.S., pro-Ukraine in general, or anti-Ukraine in general. And so it's going to look at all the pro-Ukraine users on TikTok. How do they know that? Because of how many, pro-Ukrainian channels you're following, how many pro-influencers you're following for the state of Ukraine, how many anti-Russian TikTokers you're following, how many pro-China TikTokers you're following. It's going to look at your history of searches. It's going to look at your overall data that it has collected on you. And if it realizes that you might be pro-Ukraine, through its algorithm, it's going to alter it tailored to you to send out specific messages on TikTok through different influencers that are going to show up on your TikToks, right? That try to subtly show some dis, or malinformation about the war in Ukraine slowly through time to alter your decision, saying, wait, maybe the U.S. shouldn't be supporting Ukraine, right? And it'll do it methodically. The state of China will do it very methodically. It'll target people based on their demographics. In other words, probably 18 to 26-year-olds that are of that really independent kind of voting age, that maybe haven't voted yet, that get a chance to vote this time around. And the purpose is going to say, hey, you need to vote for people in the U.S. that are going to not retaliate against China if China helps Russia in the war in Ukraine, or in general to prevent the U.S. from engaging in supporting Ukraine, period, right? So it's going to start sending those out. The longer you look at one of those, as you've already mentioned, the algorithm states, the more it can send to you. And all of a sudden, if you were in between or pro-Ukraine or pro-U.S. help in Ukraine, all of a sudden you're going to start questioning that. You're going to start making different decisions on potentially for whom to vote on this issue.
Right.
And if the U.S. starts saying it's going to sanction the state of China for supporting the war in Ukraine on the Russian side, you're going to be more likely to vote your, disenfranchisement over that issue, your dissatisfaction with that issue, and might vote entirely for somebody else. And that's what we really mean by neurocognitive hacking as well, is that holy moly, you could have been voting for somebody that was pro-support the war in Ukraine, and now all of a sudden you're going to be voting for somebody that's anti-war in Ukraine, or pro-Russia in this case, war in Ukraine. So it completely altered your decision making. And this is what Russia tried to do in 2016. What they did do in 2016 was try to sow a little bit of confusion in consumers on Facebook to change who they were going to vote for based on different stances In Russia's case, they didn't care really what way you voted. They just wanted to sow confusion and cause you to change your mind a little bit. It turns out more of it happened to go for Trump based on academic studies, but Russia really didn't care. They just wanted to mess with your mind and make you doubt for whom you were going to vote for. And that's right. And this is, everybody's susceptible to this. I remember in the voting booth, I won't tell you my political proclivities, but going in there and being like, now I don't know. And I was like, wow, is this operate? Like, did Russia win? Like, did they get to me by researching all this stuff? And I really, casted doubts in my own mind about it. It didn't change.
I've probably been influenced in the idea that I don't really vote anymore, or I've made that decision of like, I don't want to vote for either of these people, especially even in the upcoming election. I'm like, I don't even want, am I even going to go into the voting booth? And in some respects, they win with that as well. It's not just about picking one side or the other. It's also try to get the people not to even show up to vote, right?
That's a great point, Keith. Yeah. And if you watch Russia Today, which I have the luxury of having to do for my job, they'll, or even on X, right, formerly Twitter, they'll post stories just showing how old and senile both presidential candidates are in their opinion. Yeah. And the idea is to try to get Americans to feel disenfranchised with the political process, to stay out of it completely whatsoever. Right. And that's a propaganda operation. I will say, however, Keith, that is also a rational response to a presidential two-party system when neither of the candidates really represents you. So you could be falling victim to propaganda, or you could be a rational American voter fed up with the presidential
I need to start my own propaganda campaign about moving to a parliamentary system where we could have 17 different parties and then have to form a coalition government, because sometimes that feels like it makes sense. And so now I'm going to be accused of propaganda. I want to get into the main question, which is, there are many teenage users and young people that are using TikTok. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you mind if I just wanted to follow up with the cyber-enabled influence operation.
Go ahead. Yeah. I'll ask that question again after this one.
Yeah. So sorry. But because this is very important. So the cyber-enabled operation is where TikTok harvests all your data that you've willingly consented to, and what they'll do is they'll create a phishing scam and you've given them your email address, right, on TikTok to sign up, and your user profile and everything, and so they'll target a very specific spear phishing campaign via email, or on TikTok itself, or on other social media apps, or through your iMessage on iPhone, where it's a phishing scam. It's a cyber attack. So based on all the information you've given them on TikTok, that's the influence operation part. they'll be able to write an email to you or a message to you or some type of ad to you on a social media app, maybe TikTok, maybe not TikTok, because China can buy Instagram ads, for instance. China can buy Facebook ads, for instance, that are likely to allow you to click or make you click on it because it's so specifically tailored towards your interest that you're going to miss the red flags that it's a false email, for instance, that it's a phishing scam. You're going to click it. And if you're like most individuals, you're going to be checking these apps at work, right? And if you're on your work's Wi-Fi, that means once you click that ad, once you click that email, once you click that app in Messenger, it gets scarier than that. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't click on some of the Messenger apps, the fact that they even send the message to you on iPhone means that they now have access to your phone and can cause you to fall for this scam. This is very sophisticated. It's only been done a few times so far, but you don't even have to click the link in the message anymore. If you open it just to see who it is, you have now exposed your phone and your data and your Wi-Fi system to whoever is engaging in this, which is terrifying if you think about it.
And you have an example of how you almost fell for one of these, right? Like, because you were telling me about one of your interests was running, I think.
Yeah, I was going to leave that out of it.
No, you didn't fall for it, but you almost fell for it.
Yeah. So I'm an endurance runner, and on one of the social media apps, there was a 90% off of a particular shoe that I happen to like, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes,
this is the greatest deal ever!"
Yeah, I clicked the ad, and then it went to like a third party vendor, and I was like, "This is weird. Why is the shoe going through this company?" But I was so like stoked, and I needed a new pair of shoes because I go through shoes like monthly, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to help my budget." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm definitely doing this." And I was like I caught it in the nick of time, but like I was right there. So it's terrible. And this is what I do for a living, and they still almost got me. Yeah. I don't know if that was a state or a typical cyber criminal doing that to gain, identity theft and identity fraud information. But in this case, think of the consequences. Let's say you're on a military base and, you get this message on your phone. You brought your phone and you're not supposed to, and you click it, right? Now they have that, that Wi-Fi, they have connections to everything. They can get into any system. If you're in the hospital business, any healthcare industry, and you're at a hospital, you're on the Wi-Fi, you check your email from your phone on the Wi-Fi, you click that link, you've now allowed, let's say, the state of China, access to every device on that network in the hospital. Now, if you think about the medical Internet of Things, such as pacemakers are connected to Wi-Fi now. Think about how high-ranking individuals in the United States Senate are averagely above the age of 70. How many of those folks are on pacemakers? The state of China just got all the information on the IP addresses for these devices, who has these devices. Now you can think the worst case situation, right? This is hypothetical, right? It can happen. We have no information that it's happened yet, but they can targetedly assassinate high-ranking political officials because somebody who wasn't paying attention and has TikTok has allowed the state of China to cast a net and catch them in this phishing campaign. And they've allowed the access to every device connected, all the information, all the HIPAA protected things in a hospital has now just been given to the state of China by somebody clicking that, all made possible by somebody allowing them to collect data off of them through TikTok.
So I want to get to the teenage question now, and again, you've already explained some of the ways that China and other nation states can affect, basically information warfare against us. But when I tell my kids, oh, TikTok is bad, it's owned by the Chinese government, and they're using all of your data, they just look at me and they shrug and they go, well, I'm just watching people dancing. I'm just watching I'm watching things like my son is just like, I'm just watching basketball stuff because he likes the Celtics, and my daughter is like, well, I just watch the people that are dancing or theater stuff. And they don't get the understanding that, like, well, an adult is telling me that TikTok and China are bad, but I don't care. Like, how do parents get through to their kids that this is an app that they should not be using? And again, maybe they should just go to Instagram, but Instagram is bad for a whole other set of reasons too. Like, how does a parent get them to understand this?
I guess the first thing is just to let them know that this is what is going on, that this is what happens on social media apps, right? In this case, that a foreign adversary uses this app, and that they can, if they so choose, engage in propaganda or misinformation, fake news against the teenagers out there. And at least, even if they say, so what? They know that it's happening, and in the back of their mind, they know that it's happening. So it's a part of like internet or cyber media literacy, where at least that they're exposed to the fact that this is happening. Now they can continue with it, but at least hopefully they know, and little by little they'll hopefully make the rational choice and get off TikTok and all social media apps, right? So that's one way. The second way is just to completely explain it as best as you can. Like, look, this can be used as a weapon of warfare, where if China takes it to the theoretical extreme, they can engage in exactly what we've been talking about. If you have a smart car, they can shut your brakes down once they get access to your vehicle's, internal systems that are all, based on the Internet of Things now. That not even that, through radio frequencies, they can get into things attached to the Internet of Things.
Yeah.
And cause car crashes. They can do all kinds of things. Again, theoretically, it's not theoretically, they can do it. We just don't know if it's put in practice yet.
Yeah.
And that just idea that, hey, somebody can control you, can control your devices without you having any say of it. Most teenagers are like, no, I want control of it all. So if you just phrase it to them like that, hopefully they might just want to get off of TikTok.
Right.
And they're not just following all these people. First of all, unless it's like the NBA's official account, right? They don't know the users that are pushing this information out there, if they in fact are agents of the Chinese Communist Party, some type of other influencer that's seeking some type of dis or malinformation. It's impossible to verify most of these individuals. And the state of China, the state of Russia, non-state actors such as ISIS, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, all of them pay influencers in the U.S. to produce their own content to release that doesn't seem like it's harmful in any way, but very methodically and meticulously seeks to change the perceptions of how we feel about Al-Qaeda, right? Of how we feel about Hezbollah. This is a case in point. Hamas has hired Russia to handle its influence operations on social media. So many reasons that we have so many protests in the United States that are pro-Gaza, not just seemingly pro-Gaza, but pro-October 7th, right? The attacks that Hamas engaged against the state of Israel, with many teenagers and folks under the age of 30 saying, well, Israel deserved it for their policies. A lot of that is being generated by the state of Russia that Gaza has paid for them to do, and they're paying agents inside the United States to produce, create, and disseminate this content through various social media accounts, but especially through TikTok. That is just terrifying.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
like the two things you were telling me about before the show too was that these states are employing people within the U.S. to do this, and there's a specific reason for that, and you can tell me that in a second. But then also they're paying influencers to make content that can be subversive, and the influencers might not realize that they're part of a propaganda campaign. They just see a paycheck coming in, right, and then with some instructions on maybe what kind of content to make.
Absolutely. And for China, right, it's very sophisticated. So it's through like a shell corporation or something, right? So if you were contacted by them, it wouldn't be, sign CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, right? It would be signed through some corporation, and your checks would be coming from them, not through the state of China. So you would have no idea. If you're a Chinese, a person of Chinese descent living in the United States, typically, what you're doing if you're an influencer for TikTok, for instance. The Chinese Communist Party hires their diaspora individuals living in the United States to do this purposefully. Folks that are in the United States illegally, regardless of what country they're from, have a higher chance of engaging in these types of influence operations as well. So they're helped to get into the United States from places in the Middle East, for instance, from China, for instance, and their job once they get here isn't what you would think of typical terrorist cell type of activity. It's influencing the American mindset through TikTok, through Instagram, things of that nature. And so that's something we just need to be aware of. And like, holy moly, like this is a whole nother level of we don't understand what's going on with these other nation states with our open policies. I believe in democratic open policies, but we need to be aware of other nation states, just like on our social media apps, understand that we're an open society. So with that, they're going to try to take advantage of us being an open society, and we can't really attack back.
Right. And it's troublesome for the intelligence community that because they're in the U.S. and we can't necessarily spy on them, right?
Absolutely. It's so much more difficult to do that. You can spy on them if you go through the process and you get the FISA warrants and all these different protocols and everything. But the main question is, well, how do you know that they're doing this on TikTok if you haven't already looked into it, right? And so your FISA warrant's going to be, denied because, like, how'd you get that information in the first place if they're in the U.S.? So it's a very cumbersome, complex, complicated problem, and our foreign adversaries know that and take advantage of it. This is another reason why U.S. citizens and school-age folks need to understand American politics, because foreign adversaries understand American politics way better than most of us understand American politics. So they know how to take advantage of the loopholes. They know how to take advantage just of the legal processes in the United States, and they use it to influence their state apparatus and their strategic goals.
And the wasn't there a story a couple of weeks ago where the new head of the NSA was testifying in front of Congress, and he said, and again, I could be wrong on this, but they have evidence where they noticed that Chinese hackers were coming into systems and they weren't doing anything in the systems. They were just almost, and they didn't know what they were doing, but they were in some public infrastructure networks, and it's almost like they're just waiting to be ready for when they're about to attack, and then they can disrupt some of the infrastructure thing, like electrical systems or dams or things like that, right? Like it was interesting. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, and they were talking about, we know that they're there, but we don't know exactly what they're doing yet. That's even more terrifying, isn't it?
So this is the nature of, cyber attacks in general. So the U.S. has known that China's been in our infrastructure for 5 years now. The public release of that information is one thing. The internal intel community's understanding of that is longstanding.
Sure.
The problem is that some of this malware, some of these systems that China has in the United States infrastructure, it's impossible to know 100% if that's there for cyber espionage purposes, for instance, which is kind of accepted. It's kind of like we know Chinese spies are here, kind of guys as ambassadors or working in the ambassadors' offices, but we know that they're really foreign agents. We have the same exact things in other countries, right? The United States operates through other agencies, but they're really CIA officials operating as spies. Everybody knows this. It's allowed. It's kind of a hush-hush rule. We try not to kick out your spies. You don't kick out our spies. It's been going on for years, right? Like we just know. And it makes the news when it does happen, right? The U.S. kicked out 10 Russian embassy officials, quote, spies,
right?
Because of whatever, right? The same thing occurs in cyberspace. So you don't understand right off the bat if China is in our dam infrastructure systems, for instance, for a back door so that they can get into other infrastructure and just look at what we're doing, look at how we operate, look at where everything is connected that they could in an event of war take advantage of and flood a system to cause a system to overheat and explode, for instance, for a physical attack if they wanted to, or if they're just watching. Right. And so the problem is they can have a bug there that's just for watching purposes, just for intel collection, cyber intelligence processes, or is that a logic bomb that at any minute that they're going to initiate and activate, and it's going to turn into a weapon and unleash some type of massive cyber attack against the United States. And so that's the issue. It's kind of what we kind of call like the cybersecurity dilemma, the cyber intelligence dilemma, where you just don't know what's going to happen. We can't say this. I can't say this confidently, right? But the U.S. more than certain has the same things in other countries' infrastructure as well. And so that's our deterrence: is that China, if you're going to do this, that we're going to respond.
Yeah,
we're going to do it back. But further. The United States national security strategy, this is our public record, our public doctrine says, if you initiate or unleash a cyber attack against the United States' infrastructure, the United States reserves the right to respond through kinetic missile strikes. So our biggest deterrent against this type of operation is that we reserve the right to go to war with you if you attack us through cyber means. That's kind of opening a Pandora's box.
Yeah.
It's unsure if the U.S. would ever do that. It's unsure if the citizens would accept that as a reasonable and just response to a cyber attack. But the U.S. does reserve the right. Israel has done that. There has been a cyber attack against Israel, and Israel said, nope, we're responding with missiles, and we're going to blow up the facility that implemented the workers where they implemented this cyber attacks.
Yeah. So we're already seeing this in action in this Israel conflict, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is with Israel and Syria, and this one went back a few years ago. But, it's getting to that point where, and this is why we're, with the war in Ukraine as well, people are saying, why haven't we seen more sophisticated cyber attacks? Well, we have seen very sophisticated cyber attacks. We've seen very sophisticated influence attacks. We've seen very sophisticated deep fakes in this war. But a lot of the Russian cyber attacks have been mitigated and prevented because NATO has their main cybersecurity folks in Ukraine helping prevent some of this from occurring. The other side, though, is why hasn't something massive come from the state of Russia is because maybe the West responds with kinetic operations if they do something that like shuts down water supply for NATO, right? So you just don't know what the response is going to be. Russia doesn't know. Excuse me. And the U.S. doesn't really know, frankly.
Right.
Which president, for instance, President Biden or former President Trump, if he wins, which of them is more likely to engage in a kinetic response to a cyber attack? That's something voters should consider, whether or not they like the idea of that or don't like the idea of that. This is an option that's out there. It's active in our national security strategy.
Wow. Yeah. That's an excuse for basically not having the election and just delay it for another 4 years. All right. I'm just kidding. So are we past the point of no return in terms of this ability, in terms of these nation states' ability to access all of this data? Should we all just kind of throw up our hands and go, oh, I give up? Because again, this has probably been going back for the last 10 years now, right? At least. Oh, certainly. Yeah, absolutely. It's been going back for a while. I don't think it's past the point of no return. There's things that we can do as citizens. There's things that the United States can do. We can fight back. The United States can be more active and aggressive. The United States is pretty defensive acting in information warfare influence operations. The same with cyber warfare. The United States is much more in an active defense posture. Its official strategy is called persistent engagement, is how the United States defines its cyber policy against other nation states. What that means is the United States tries not to attack first. It tries not to be on the offensive, but it reacts to anything that it senses and tries to retaliate in kind, or maybe one-ups it just so the other side gets a deterrent. Hey, if we do this again, we know that the United States is going to act a little bit more hostile than we thought the United States was going to act. So the U.S. hasn't done that so far in information warfare. The U.S.'s doctrine, first of all, the U.S. doesn't have a definition of information warfare. It has multiple definitions of information warfare, and that's quite problematic. If the audience is interested, you can access a publication I have on this called Weaponizing Words on the Cyber Defense Review. Okay.
We just don't have a definition of this. Almost each branch of the military and each intelligence unit within the United States government, 17 or 18 of them, have different concepts of information warfare. So if you have a different concept of information warfare, think of the unity of approach to retaliating or being offensive towards nation state actors. If you and I don't have the same definition of something, how are we going to come up with a straightforward policy to tackle that? Right. Like it's impossible. And so that's a problem the U.S. has. So we can encourage the U.S. to have a set definition, a set policy, maybe a set command structure of information warfare to fight back. The second thing is to just be more offensive in its capabilities. Why isn't the U.S. hiring U.S. citizens starting in these nation states to engage and be influencers, right? Why doesn't the U.S. play their own game? Or is something less controversial than that? The U.S. Army, for instance, has a doctrine in its information advantage, which is what they call information warfare document, where it has the capability to inform or educate domestic citizens of what's going on in the information domain. So in other words, the U.S. Army can engage in information sharing domestically.
Right.
In other words, we can talk about how great democracy is, how great the U.S. is compared to towards China's human rights policies. We can share what China is doing to folks in Hong Kong, folks in Taiwan, or what they want to do in Taiwan, to the Uyghur population in Xinjiang province of China, which basically they put folks in re-education camps, which are modern day concentration camps.
Yeah.
So the U.S. Army can engage in these type of influence operations domestically to show the American audience what China is actually capable of and what they're doing. We choose not to do that very much because it really fuzzes the line on whether this is propaganda or not, but it's not really propaganda. It's educational. It's, hey, this is what China is doing. It's probably some form of soft propaganda or as much as saying the Pledge of Allegiance is soft propaganda, right? There's no real harm there. There's no real negative intent or something like that can harm the American domestic psyche. It's just, hey, this is what's happening in China. You should be aware of that. So the DOD doesn't engage in that really right now, but they can engage in that. Right. And then finally, shut me up if you need to. This stuff. Well,
I got a couple more questions, but you're on a roll, so keep going. I was going to say, bad guys. The bad guys always use propaganda. The good guys always use what? Information sharing.
That's it. Or educational policies.
Educational, right? It's educational information.
Right. The other thing is, again, the citizen just being aware of this. So, don't believe things that you see on social media off the bat. Double check, verify your sources. Reagan used to say, trust but verify. No, don't trust but verify now, right? Don't assume something you see on TikTok is true. Don't, even videos, right? So many people post videos of violent acts in America. Those things are altered now. They're so easily altered. Not that just they can pick and choose what they show so you don't have the full context of something. They can alter images, videos, the voices, everything. So they can create completely fake videos. If anybody's been out there in public, or if you answer your phone to an unknown phone caller, right? They have access to your voice now if they choose to attack you like that. So just be careful and don't assume anything is truth until you verified it.
Except me. You can trust me, because when I become emperor of the world, everything I say will be true.
I tell all my students, never, ever trust anything I say. Always fact check me as your professor. If somebody's telling you that you can trust them, always go out and don't trust them.
Right. Well, that's the old axiom of the X-Files was trust no one. Don't even, trust no one.
And for me, I want my students to do their own research anyway. So it's like, no, don't take my word for it. Like, go out there and do the research.
Right. What are some of the short-term and long-term solutions? Because there are a couple of ways we can fight back as citizens, but also as governments. And in the short term, this TikTok ban you feel is a good thing, right? Like this should happen. What do you think are the chances of this actually happening? Because they have less than a year now to divest themselves from ByteDance. But ByteDance has already said, or China's already said, no, we're not going to sell off TikTok. It feels like they're going to try to go through the court systems and claim this First Amendment case, but it feels like the more and more I read about it, the more and more likelihood of this national security reason being a good thing for.
Yeah, I'm definitely for the. Yeah, I'm definitely for the ban or the forced sell of ByteDance to a sole U.S. proprietor that has no connections to the Chinese Communist Party. I think that makes common sense. We do have to balance First Amendment rights with national security. But typically, in many of these situations, national security through the court system outweighs First Amendment rights, especially when you're talking about corporations' First Amendment rights versus citizens' First Amendment rights. Now, we know that corporations do have protections under the Bill of Rights because of the famous case of Citizens United.
Right.
However, that hasn't been tested in a national security understanding. And so I don't think that ByteDance will win this lawsuit if it goes that far. And it, of course, will go to the courts, as you were saying. So that's one way. The other way is we can just get off of social media. We can limit our time as citizens, either completely off of social media, or we can just, take advantage of our phone apps that show, your time is up on your social media. You've been on it for too long. Get off of it and go read a book or something. So what I always like to say is, look, the best way to counter false dis and malinformation is by understanding the classics, right? If you're a parent, as much as you can, if your kid is on TikTok for 2 hours a day, they should read Plato for 30 minutes a day, right? They need to counteract that kind of
I got to try to institute that with my own kids, see how that works.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be Plato, like, something, educational, something 1984, right? That way they can get what China's really doing, what the state of Russia is really doing. Some type of, real book that increases their creative, critical, analytical thinking skills, for instance. And as adults, we can do that as well, too, right? Like, I'm on Instagram a lot, but I am also reading, hundreds of articles per month, and I try to read books when I can, but at least I'm reading, 100 or 200 or 300 scholarly articles on this a month, making my synapses in my brain act a different way that can help me understand when I see something that might be false, that might be dis or malinformation. And that type of education and continuing to read and learn helps me when I see even a news story, or helps me when a candidate says something that's like, that doesn't seem right. Let me investigate that a little more. So that's a very short-term solution, is that limit our access. As parents, we can be dictators if we want to be with this. And sure, our kids might hate us, but hey, some things they are in their best interest, even if they hate us, right? Like, don't drink and drive. We're going to punish you if you do something like that. Like, this is that type of serious, in my opinion.
Yeah. So what are some of the long-term solutions that need to be done, either through the government or education, or, again, like you said, even parents can do this? So what's the main long-term solution? For
long term, as I said, like, the U.S. government's responses in creating a more active presence in cyber attacks, a more active presence in informational attacks against strategic adversaries, a K through 12 school curriculum that I hate using that word in the curriculum sense, that encourages, gives students the opportunity to learn full-scale cyber hygiene, implemented through local boards of education and approved by the states, right? A cyber hygiene policy instituted in the K through 12 scenario, nationwide, but done properly through the states and the localities, that teaches students in each grade, just like you're exposed to history or social studies in each grade, little by little, where you're exposed to proper cyber hygiene and not just cyber attacks and how to avoid them, but digital media literacy as well should be included with this, so that you understand what misinformation is, disinformation, malinformation, propaganda, how it all works on social media apps, what the effects of social media apps have on you, because we haven't even talked about, like, just the mental health problems.
Right. Well, the Surgeon General just came out a couple of weeks ago with an op-ed piece in the New York Times saying that they should put warning labels on all of these apps, just the way they do with cigarettes and alcohol, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a huge, suicide rates are up amongst teenagers that use these type of apps. Acts of aggression are up amongst teenagers that use these types of acts. And unfortunately, negative self-image is up on teenagers who use these apps, because they look at influencers who edit and use deep fakes on their own images to make themselves look, societally perfect or whatever. And then I can't possibly live up to that standard, so I'm going to have a negative self-image, which is just, terrible for a teenager.
And we've covered that on a lot of other episodes. So if you're interested in that, like, obviously, I'd say go watch some of those other episodes. We haven't even discussed AI yet. You did sort of mention this with some of the deep fakes and some of those technologies. Are you starting to? And it would be naive of us to assume that AI would not be used by these nation states to generate, either better messages or use it to find the data even quicker. Like, what are you hearing about AI in a lot of this information warfare space?
So hopefully you can post a link to a couple of my pubs, because we actually cover this in a publication, How the U.S., Russia, and China Use Artificial Intelligence in Information Warfare, just released in Defense and Security Analysis, published by the Post-Naval Graduate School. I know this is a friendly conversation, not supposed to get all professory on you or anything, but sorry, I just had to throw a shout out. I happen to be a co-author on that publication.
Okay.
But what we see is that Russia and China both use AI to advance their algorithms to spread information faster, to come up with better messaging that targets different audiences quicker, more efficient, and that has a better effect on changing the cognitive perception of individuals. They are definitely use this. They're using it to generate memes that will relate to their target audience better. Deep fakes, they're generating tons of deep fakes and really getting into some serious deep fakes. So what we're looking at now, and I always warn people about this, is sensitive content. Russia's very interested in using deep fakes for U.S. politicians engaging in adult entertainment. So think about if they do that, a week before the election, whether it's local elections, state elections, or national elections, and it's a complete deep fake of an adult enterprise, for instance, and the whole video's out there, and now it's widely disseminated on social media because they have the botnets that can do this. And now you watch it 2 days before the election, you think it's real. And so you change your mind on the candidate or something because you think that they engaged in this activity. And now the election has been completely manipulated and changed because of Russian deep fakes. They're very interested in doing this because they know that particular act is a big social moray in the United States particularly, and so they're looking into that.
I'm not looking forward to the month before the election because I'm sure that there's going to be so much garbage out there that you probably should just stop paying attention the whole month before.
And we know Ukraine used this in Russia already, where they created a deep fake of Russian President Vladimir Putin, where he said that he was mobilizing the entire population of Russia, and they actually hacked into a TV station in Russia and aired it in Russia. This is 6 months ago, 8 months ago, and so. Russia did a great job at containing that, but Ukraine was successful in that attack, and that it actually got out there through the TV broadcast. Russia was quick to respond and everything, but think if that happened in the United States, and we have the records to show, we have the research to show, the average American makes his or her mind up within 48 hours on an issue.
Wow.
So if you see a video, you have 48 hours, let's say if you're the candidate, and it comes out, this comes out of you and it's not real. You have 48 hours to change to set the narrative, is what we call it.
Yeah.
So that a person knows that that's not real or not. After that 48 hours, no matter what you do, even if the state of Russia comes out and says, yep, we made that up, the average American after 48 hours does not change his or her mind on how they view that situation.
And you can see that across, it doesn't have to be politics. You can see that on almost any issue. I think the first round of headlines is usually what people start thinking of. And then, the second, third, fourth story that may disrepute, that may, cancel that initial story. That goes, people don't see that. Like, I was in the newspaper business. People never really see the correction. It's always that first headline that people will think about.
And we only read the headlines, right? We don't read the story. We don't dig into it.
So I want to talk, my last question, I want to, you cover all of this stuff every day. How paranoid are you in about all this stuff? Like, I think we were talking before the show, you don't have any of these apps on your phone. Do you not allow your students to have phones in the classroom, or you're not living like going home and then hiding in a bunker somewhere, are you?
No. I'm pretty paranoid about this kind of stuff. So I try not to have the apps on my phone. If I need to use the app, one of these apps, I do it through the desktop version. The algorithm appears to be a little clunky when you use, let's say, Instagram on your computer. When you don't download the app, when you just go to the URL, the algorithm seems to be out of whack, that it can't capture your information that well, especially if you use a VPN on your desktop, for instance. So it's like, what is going on? The ads I get, the reels I get are completely different than if I download the app and have it on my phone. So if people need these apps, I encourage them to use it on their desktop without downloading the app. So for instance, part of being a professor who publishes is that I kind of have to be like self-promoting, right? And promote my research.
Right.
So people, hey, this is what I'm doing or whatever. But so I do, I promote my research on all the apps, but I try to go on the desktop versions and do everything there so that I'm not hooked on any of the algorithms, because the algorithms will get you, right? They'll suck you in immediately, especially my generation. If you're locked in, like that's it, you're never going to get out of it. I try to have, if people come over, I don't like, sharing my Wi-Fi. My friends will be like, what's your Wi-Fi code? And I'm like, I forgot it. Unfortunately, my wife is like, I have it on my iPhone. I can just tap it. And I'm like, no.
You go to this now, like, do you use credit cards? Do you go to the store and pay cash only, or, so that you're not being tracked that way? You don't probably buy anything online.
Now, if I give that information away, right, like China knows how to come after me, so I'm not going to comment on that, so no comment. But I try to be as sophisticated as possible when I can. We
know that Craig really likes grape Kool-Aid, so we're gonna try to affect it that way.
It does. The the paranoia is, I really do think the framing constitutional paradigm that the United States' founding framers created is really, which is classical republicanism, right? Not Republican Party, right? It's completely disassociated from that term, but representative government is really being challenged and is under threat from social media, first of all, but then through foreign malign adversary influence operations on social media. And so what keeps me up at night is that 100% of Americans pretty much are on some form of social media, and they don't understand the misconception of knowledge, the misconception of the United States' Constitution, the misconception of politics, the misconception of everything that is really contrary or anti the U.S. constitutional framework. And so my biggest fear, the thing that does cause me a lot of anxiety and keeps me up quite often, is our entire constitutional framework is being disrupted by China and Russia, by the governments purposely, and we don't care.
Yeah.
We don't educate ourselves on what the constitutional process is, what the Constitution does, what checks and balances is, why, for all of its flaws, which need not be mentioned, but we know the Constitution had very serious flaws. For all of its flaws, it also had brilliant ideas to protect citizens from the government, to protect the government from citizens as well. And this is slowly evaporating, partly because of social media influence on our lives, partly because of foreign adversaries knowing that they can disrupt and negatively affect the constitutional process because they know our process is better than us. We don't study the Constitution very much in college. Russia and China students study the U.S. Constitution very much in their setting. And so why is that? It's because, know the enemy better than yourselves. Know the enemy better than they know themselves. And they're taking advantage of it. This is a 2,000-year-old principle in war fighting. And unfortunately, because life in America, life in the United States is so good with all our problems, it's still so very good that we're taking for granted what the framers tried to create, which is to build towards a more perfect union each day. And instead, we're just letting it kind of evaporate and crumble around us. And that's a problem, I think, that worries me.
Good stuff there. I think we're running out of time. Dr. Craig Albert, again, lots to talk about here. We'd love to have you back on the show, as a lot of these things develop. So again, thank you for your time and talking to us about all of these issues.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry to end on a sad note there.
Well, no, it was kind of optimistic at the end. I'd like to always end with optimism. Yeah, go America.
Yeah, and on good notes, we have ultra running, we have bass fishing.
There you go.
We have lots of happy things.
All right, thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right, that's all the time we have for today's episode. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, add any thoughts you have below. Join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.